Hi Reddit. Have you ever been scared to the core of your soul? What's the story? The tall man in the basement. A few years back, when I was still living at my parents' place, my girlfriend and I were crashing on the couch in the unfinished basement. It was late, lights off, and we were both asleep, until she suddenly shook me awake, whispering in total panic. There's a really tall man standing across the basement. He's watching us. Her voice was shaking. My whole body went cold. I slowly peeked over the back of the couch, and sure enough, in the dark, I could barely make out the shape of someone very tall, just standing there. He was so big his head almost touched the basement ceiling. I could barely breathe. I leaned in and told her I was going to jump up and turn the light on. It was one of those hanging bulbs with a string. I told her that as soon as I pulled it, she should run for the stairs. I sat there, hyping myself up, heart pounding. Counted to 3. Then I jumped off the couch and yanked the string. The light flicked on, and I finally saw what it really was. It was my dad's damn scuba diving suit. He had it hanging from the ceiling to dry, and in the dark it looked exactly like some creepy giant dude. My hands were shaking for at least half an hour after that. My girlfriend and I were just sitting there, breathing hard, trying to recover. Eventually, we both started laughing. But in that moment, I've never been so freaked out in my life. The white figure at the door. I was around 11 or 12 when this happened. My dad usually worked late, so most nights I was on my own. We lived way out in the Florida Pinewoods, in this single-story ranch house far from town. At night, the place could feel real isolated. Every door in the house was made of glass, those French-style ones, and none of them had blinds or curtains. So when it got dark, the tree line outside just turned into this black wall of forest, barely touched by the moonlight. With all the lights on inside and the TV running, it made things feel safer, but honestly, it just made it easier for anyone outside to see in, while I couldn't see a thing out. That night, I needed to grab something from what we called the back room. It used to be the garage, but we'd turned it into part of the house. Still had concrete floors and unfinished walls, it always felt cold and kind of creepy. I was digging around for whatever I needed when I happened to glance up, and my heart just stopped. Right outside the glass door, barely a few feet away, was this tall, completely white figure. Had to be 6 feet tall, no face, no head I could see, just long, white hair hanging straight down, like that girl from The Ring. No movement. No sound. Just standing there. That was the moment I found out there's a third option besides fight or flight: freeze. I was locked in place. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. It felt like all the blood in my body had disappeared. And then, finally, my brain clicked. It was our damn horse. It had gotten out of the pen and wandered up to the house, and what I was looking at was its backside. Just its tail but pressed up against the glass under the carport. I felt like such an idiot, but also I swear I lost a few years off my life that night. I was almost his next victim. I came terrifyingly close to being murdered. It's a long story, but I'll keep it short as I can. Back when I was a senior in high school, a girl from my neighborhood went missing. About a month later, they found her body. Around that same time, her adoptive father started contacting a bunch of people. Apparently, he had this weird obsession with my ex-boyfriend, who had dated the missing girl briefly back in middle school. One day, this adoptive father shows up at my house, saying he wants to talk to me about my ex. But he barely asked me anything. Instead, he just went on and on about himself, how he was part of a white supremacy gang and how he takes out 12 people a year. He said that like it was normal. After that, he kept trying to meet with me, alone. He said I wasn't being honest in front of my mom. But I wasn't comfortable at all. I told him no, over and over. Still, he kept pushing. It got so bad I needed security to walk me to and from school and work. That's how unsafe I felt. Eventually, he got arrested on some unrelated charges. Detectives came to question me about what he said during our talks. They warned me to stay away from him completely. I remember they pulled my mom aside for a private conversation. At the time, I didn't know what they told her. It wasn't until years later, when I was in college, that my mom finally told me. The detectives believed he was the one who murdered his daughter. And worse, he had a plan to kill me next and frame my ex-boyfriend. The idea was to make it look like my ex snapped and started targeting his old girlfriends. It's been 7 years since that nightmare. The adoptive father was finally convicted in February. But honestly, I'm still scared. I testified against him, and I can't stop wondering if one of his so-called brothers might still be watching me. I thought my nephew was dead. I went into my 2-year-old nephew's room one morning to wake him up. He was lying in his crib in this weird, stiff posture. Eyes wide open. Just staring. Not blinking. Not moving. Nothing. At first, I kind of chuckled to myself, thinking, damn, he looks dead. I even said, "Good morning, Matthew." No reaction. His eyes didn't move. Didn't look at me. I stepped closer, saying his name again. Still nothing. His little face looked totally blank. Eyes wide and unfocused, body totally limp. And that's when the panic hit me. I started gently shaking him, calling, "Matthew? Matthew? Matthew?" Then, suddenly, his eyes snap into focus. He smiles up at me like nothing happened, then does his usual big stretch like he just woke up from the best nap of his life. Turns out the kid was asleep with his eyes open. It lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like I aged 10 years in that moment. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I've never been that scared in my life. No idea why it happened. And he's never done it again. Thank God. The night I thought I'd lose my dad. I was about to drift off to sleep one night. I was 16 years old, so this was a while ago. Out of nowhere, my phone rang. It was my dad. That alone was weird. He never called me, especially not at 2 in the morning, especially not when we were both in the same house. He told me to come downstairs because he wasn't feeling well. That immediately set off alarms in my head. My dad almost never got sick, so something had to be really wrong. When I got downstairs, I found him slouched on the couch, soaked in sweat, one hand clutching at his chest. He was making these strange, painful sounds. I sat down beside him and he told me he'd already called for an ambulance. Then he went quiet for a moment. After about 30 seconds, he looked at me and said softly, "Can you hold my hand?" That line hit me like a freight train. It felt like he was saying goodbye. Like he really thought he was going to die right there on the couch with me sitting next to him. The ambulance took longer than it should have, and in that time, I just watched him get worse. His breathing was shallow, his eyes looked like he was slipping away. I was doing everything I could to stay calm, but inside I was falling apart. When the paramedics finally showed up, they were calm at first, asking questions and setting up their equipment. But the second they hooked him up to the EKG, everything changed. They moved fast, bags of fluid, needles, wires, machines. They started handing things to me, telling me to hold this or bring that. It was chaos. And I was terrified. I heard one of them say he was having a heart attack. They asked me to call my mom. My parents were separated and I lived with my dad. I tried calling her but she didn't answer. I told the paramedics she wouldn't pick up. They just said something like, "All right, take care of yourself," and left with my dad in the back of the ambulance. He was admitted to the hospital and he survived the heart attack, thank God. He ended up with some minor complications, but he pulled through. But me? I was 16 years old and completely alone in that house for 5 days. No one checked on me. Not a single person. I didn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I just sat around waiting for news. I felt like the world had stopped. My dad is everything to me. He's my best friend, my only real family. And ever since that night, I find myself getting up in the middle of the night just to make sure he's still breathing. Every day, I live with the fear that one day I'll check, and he won't be. Lost in the ocean with sharks behind me. I was out bodyboarding just before dark, riding these massive waves, easily triple overhead. I was near San Francisco, and the ocean was wild that evening. I kept drifting farther and farther out, and before I knew it, the fog rolled in. Thick stuff. I lost all sight of the shore. I had no idea which way was home anymore. The sun was gone, the water was cold, and I was completely alone in the open ocean, somewhere in the middle of great white shark territory. The fog made it impossible to tell direction, so I just picked a point and started paddling. I'd catch a faint glimpse of some headlights through the fog now and then, cars on a road somewhere, and used that to keep a general sense of where to head. It took me a couple of hours, fighting through 20-foot swells, trying not to panic. Every single splash behind me felt like it was a shark. I'd hear it and start panic paddling like crazy, convinced something was coming for me. Then I'd have to slow myself down, calm my heart, and hope I didn't just attract the very thing I feared by splashing around like wounded prey. I kept thinking, great, I'm out here looking exactly like a seal. In winter. In a place known for great whites. The ocean was alive and violent. The sound of the waves, the feeling of the current pulling at me, it was chaos. Eventually, after what felt like forever, I saw a strip of beach up ahead. But landing wasn't easy either. 12-foot waves were crashing straight onto dry sand, and the current was dragging sideways with serious force. I somehow managed to time it just right, got tossed in, and crawled up on the sand a couple miles from where I started. I had no injuries, no bite marks, no idea how I made it. That night, I slept like a baby, except I kept waking up every 2 hours screaming. I thought I was going to die in Hawaii. Man, water is terrifying. The only thing that could have made this story worse was a shark, honestly. I don't know how people spend hours out there. I couldn't even handle a few minutes of feeling helpless. So, a few months back I went to Hawaii for the first time in over 10 years. I was born and raised there. 2 of my coworkers came with me, and one evening we stopped by Hapuna Beach Park on our way to the hotel. Beautiful place, one of the top-rated beaches in the world. But there was a rough water warning. We ignored it. My cousin even warned me not to go in, said the ocean was too wild that day. But we figured, hey, limited time in paradise. Let's go for it. The sun was already setting when we got there. There was a local guy on the beach, showing his son how to use a bodyboard, not just how to ride it, but how to get out of dangerous situations. It was sweet to watch. At one point, I got smacked by a wave and ended up with salt water burning through my nose. He looked at me and asked if I was alright. I nodded, said I was good, and thanked him. Eventually, I decided to paddle out a bit. The waves were about 7 feet high, and I just wanted to duck dive under them, hold my breath, feel that familiar rhythm I remembered from my childhood. One of my coworkers followed me out, even though she didn't grow up around the ocean like I did. Not the strongest swimmer either. The drop-off gets steep fast at that beach. After a few minutes, I realized the current was pulling us farther out. I looked at her and yelled that we should head back. We locked eyes, and I hoped she understood how serious it was getting. I went under to swim towards shore, but each time I came up for air, another wave crashed right on top of me. I couldn't breathe. Panic started to creep in. And then I looked back. She was falling behind, barely keeping up, and then I couldn't see her at all. I couldn't feel the bottom, water was getting into my lungs. I was coughing, shouting for help, but there was no one nearby who could hear us. I don't yell for help unless it's life or death. But that's exactly what this was. I was screaming like never before. I sounded broken. I started seeing flashes of my life. It's real, that whole life flashing before your eyes thing. I thought of my kids, living without me, maybe ending up with my mom, who's still recovering from brain surgery. I thought about work, how my coworkers would probably hate me now, not just dislike me, because I brought someone on this trip and got them killed. I thought about my dad, who passed from cancer last year. Maybe I'd see him soon. He was the one who taught me to swim, to duck the waves, to follow the sand back to shore. And then I thought about my ex. How he doesn't get to win. He doesn't get to take my kids and raise them in that abusive home because I didn't make it back. Just before I reached the rocks, that thought hit me the hardest. I didn't want my kids to end up like him. I finally touched sand. I could stand. People on the beach were watching as I screamed for help. One of my coworkers was waiting for me on the beach, saying, "You're okay, you're safe." But I was still yelling. I turned and screamed, "Where is SHE?" and pointed back. The same local guy who had helped earlier? He saw where I was pointing and told his kid to stay put. He and 2 other guys rushed to the rocky side of the beach, the most dangerous part. Even they had a tough time, but they managed to get her onto a board and bring her back in. She had cuts and bruises all over from trying to rest on lava rocks. She told me later that if I hadn't called for help, she wouldn't have made it. She didn't have any strength left. Even though she's alive and well, the guilt still hangs over me. I know, logically, I had to save myself first. I had the training. I was in survival mode. But I brought her there. I chose that beach. I feel like I abandoned someone who trusted me. She forgave me. We even cried together afterward. She told me it was okay. That we both understood something passed between us in the water, that eye contact before everything went south. We both knew how close it was. I'm in therapy now. I'm working through it. But yeah, that day could have ended way differently if not for that local guy and his quick thinking. I'm still here. We both are. But I don't look at the ocean the same anymore. The man who said nothing, but terrified me anyway. I know this is gonna sound weird, because nothing really happened. But still, it scared the hell out of me. I used to work at this little shop a few years back. One afternoon, I was tidying near the front windows, just straightening shelves and whatnot, when a guy walked in. I only caught the back of him, long hair, wearing either a leather jacket, leather pants, maybe both. Can't say for sure. At first, I didn't think much of it. Some time passed, and he started heading back toward the doors. That's when I looked up and made eye contact with him. The second our eyes met, I just froze. Goosebumps. Cold chill. Like every nerve in my body went tight. He didn't stop, didn't say a word. Just kept walking slowly toward the exit, staring right at me. The whole time. When he got close, he gave me this little smirk. Not friendly. Not amused. Just evil. That's the only word that fits. Like he wanted me to feel scared. He stepped outside and turned right. There's a big sign in our window, so for a few seconds he was blocked from view. And that's when it hit me hard, I needed to run. Get away. Even though he was already leaving, something deep in me told me, don't turn your back. Not yet. He came back into view for just a moment as he passed the sign, and he was still watching me. Staring. I didn't even breathe until he was gone. Once he passed the window and I knew for sure he wasn't coming back, I almost cried from relief. I don't know what that man was or what he wanted. He never said a thing. Never came close. Just looked at me like he knew something I didn't. And I pray to God I never see him again. How a twig saved me from a big fall. My cousins have this huge backyard that's basically a forest. There's even a pond with a dock. When we were kids, that was our summer playground. Me and a friend loved climbing trees. One day, we got up into our favorite tree and found our usual spot. I reached into my pocket for something and as I leaned forward, I lost my balance on the branch I was sitting on. I just knew I was going to fall, at least 2 stories, smacking into every branch on the way down. I shut my eyes tight and shot my arm out, grabbing for anything I could. Somehow, I caught a fresh green twig sticking out from a branch. It was one of those twigs so new you can't just snap it, you gotta twist or cut it to break it. Thank goodness I was still light back then, because that twig bent and snapped, but it didn't come loose. I just hung there for a few seconds, totally in shock, until I found another branch to settle on. Man, that scared the heck out of me. I didn't climb another tree for a couple days. But after the memory faded, I just couldn't stay away. When my body betrayed me, facing seizures at 16, I was running laps on a huge rink, like a stadium-sized one, and I'd already done a few miles. On my last set of stairs, suddenly I hit the wall and felt my body shutting down piece by piece. First my vision narrowed to a tunnel, then I went completely blind. My hearing faded too, starting with muffled sounds, then total deafness. Finally, I collapsed and blacked out. When I came to, I didn't know where I was, who I was, or what was happening. After a little while, I got up and figured it out. I threw up everywhere, and a kind janitor found me. I kept apologizing, saying, "I'm so sorry, please let me clean this up. It's disgusting." But he wasn't having it. He found a paramedic who knew what was going on and called my parents. At the ER, they couldn't find anything wrong. But 8 hours later, it happened again, only this time my dad caught me before my head hit the coffee table. That's when I learned I was having seizures. That day, I came close to dying twice, once when I almost tumbled down a concrete staircase, and again when I nearly smashed my head on the coffee table. Months later, after 14 episodes, I was officially diagnosed with epilepsy. Since then, I've had more seizures, but nothing has ever felt as intense as that day. I was just 16 and faced death head-on, all because my once healthy, athletic body betrayed me. Everything changed after that. Including me.